Hi everyone, my name is Treasure Ramirez-Simpson, and the show I chose to analyze for my project was Euphoria, specifically Season 1, Episode 2, titled Stuntin' Like My Daddy. So the show is centered around a group of kids in high school, giving viewers an insight into the highs and lows of being a teenager. The show has an omniscient narration style from an unreliable narrator, who's the main character, Rue, and she is played by Zendaya. The episode that I chose to discuss focuses on the backstory of one of the main characters, Nate, played by Jacob Elordi. While the show focuses on Nate's past the most, in this episode, it still gives a look into what other characters are going through and have been through. In this episode, we get an insight into Nate's relationship with his father, himself, and the people around him, what he likes or doesn't like, and what that may stem from. We also see Rue's relationship with drugs and how that has affected her after she overdosed. One thing that stood out to me while watching was the lighting style of the show. It is something that constantly changes to match the mood of the scene, and it plays with different colors that add to the viewing and aesthetic of the show. Analyze. The opening theme that I noticed, which carried on throughout the episode, was masculinity and sexuality. We are shown in the first few scenes that Nate's dad cheats on his mom with men and transgender individuals while recording and keeping the tapes. We see that at a young age, Nate finds these videos and watches them, which affects how he views others. We see that he likes his girlfriends to dress girly and be hairless, and for them not to act like boys and slouch. This theme of Nate pushing his feelings onto how women and men should act and look transforms into the repression of his own sexuality and the manifestation of his toxic masculinity. Because this episode opens up with Nate and follows his path of navigating his world after finding his dad's tapes, that led me to identify masculinity and sexuality as a theme. Now, a pattern I noticed in the episode was drug use. Rue has a drug addiction, and in this episode, we see how she got hooked on drugs and where that led her. We are shown her overdose, taking Oxycontin, fentanyl, and various other drugs, while still trying to hide the fact that she is no longer sober. I identified drug use as a pattern in this episode due to the number of times it showed a character participating in the use of drugs. Interpret. The theme of masculinity and sexuality in the show intertwine within the character of Nate. One magnifies the other and vice versa. Because there has been an emergence of sexual identities and gender that media has incorporated into their projects, masculinity and sexuality are socially significant themes within the show. We see this idea of masculinity intertwining with sexuality play out through the character of Nate. The show gives us insight into how Nate's emergence of his sexuality is either catered to or repressed through the actions of his father because, according to the article, fathers talk about their teen children's sexuality. Fathers care a great deal about their sons being heterosexual and attempt to craft masculine and heterosexual identities for them. For some, like Nate's father, heterosexuality is preferred and demanded from the people around him. So by having Nate try to amplify his masculinity to extend his heterosexuality in hopes to appease himself and his dad, the show attempts to tap into certain ideals that some parts of society and culture have and the harm it can cause, letting viewers see how these themes of masculinity and sexuality can affect people and those around them. As for the pattern of drug use, there are many scenes in which teen characters partake in drugs ranging from alcohol to fentanyl. These themes connect to the constant ongoing discussion of teen drug use since the use of drugs amongst teens is not a new notion. In the show, Rue is at the age where most teenagers would start partaking in problematic behavior, which she does. She is one of the many teens who have or will engage in drugs and other substances, which is why the theme of drug use is at the forefront of the show. The connection to society's reality through drug use makes this pattern important. Through Rue, viewers see the effects of teenage drug use on the teens themselves and their relationships with family and friends. Evaluate. Euphoria's value on society and culture in the US lies in the topics it chooses to discuss, such as masculinity, sexuality, and drug use. Although to some Euphoria may glamorize issues that are hard to discuss, it doesn't mean that what it discusses doesn't hold true and that the show doesn't hold value in society. Because teens are likely to start interacting with their sexuality and drugs at that age, Euphoria offers society a look into what some teens are dealing with. Because of this insight that the show gives viewers, I would place this show/episode into the upper middle section of my skyscraper model. I think for society it may rank lower, but the cinematography and musical score, as well as the show taking on sensitive topics, puts it at the higher end of my skyscraper model. As for the subway map, I would put Euphoria under intersecting at the challenging and unfamiliar section. I think it's filled with themes that most teen shows don't decide to include or don't go deeper into, which makes it unfamiliar to some. It also deals with heavy subjects that can be challenging for viewers to watch and understand. Engage. There's a lot to like when it comes to watching Euphoria. The cinematography, musical score, and cast are great pieces of the show that other people can look to for inspiration when creating a piece of media like this. There's a lot that needs no improvement, but there are some pieces that can be improved. The one thing that can be improved is how many complicated and sensitive topics this show chooses to discuss within a small teenage population. Because every problem that a show can choose to discuss seems to happen to these select few characters, it becomes overwhelming for viewers to grasp. There are also some overtly sexual scenes, and although teens may be partaking, it is still a show about young teens that should be taken into account when telling a story like this. Thank you all so much for listening to and watching my presentation.